What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Yo, welcome back and welcome into the week 6 edition of Cashing Points, the best DFS show in the space. I'm Graham. That's Jake. That's Hilo. And we're back for another great week. Guys, fun 10-game slate. A lot of fun running back plays on this slate. Let's save everybody's time. Let's get into it, and we'll get started. I have to do it. It's Bucky week, so we're going to start with Bucs and Saints. Bucs are 3.5-point favorites. 41.5 is the total. Yeah, Rachaad White is going to miss this game. Bucky Irving, Jake, is 5,400. He should get, at least a borderline bell cow role. I think Sean Tucker will probably mix in a little bit, but Bucky highlights some pretty good running back values on this slate. 5,400. What do you think about him, Bucs, and this game?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Bucky Irving at 5,400 with his projected workload is going to be, pretty clearly, I think the top running back value of the slate. He should be the highest owned running back, and I think rightfully so, especially in this spot where New Orleans could totally lay an egg with Spencer Rattler at quarterback. I don't know how much interest I'm going to end up having in, Baker Mayfield and this passing attack, but it's at least worth mentioning that, Marshawn Lattimore owns Mike Evans' soul. Mike Evans has been either suspended or ejected twice in his 14 games against Lattimore. He scored over 12 half PPR points once against Marshawn Lattimore. So that kind of makes me think this is a Chris Godwin game. He would be another guy I'd look at on the Bucs side. On the New Orleans side, Spencer Rattler's only 4K, but I have a lot of hesitancy here. No Taysom Hill, and, generally we've seen offensive efficiency for New Orleans take a hit. Without Taysom Hill in the lineup, Kamara could get peppered with checkdowns. That's certainly tempting. Rattler said he wants to get the ball to Chris Olave, but, Rattler on his own as a play, I think is maybe okay if you're paying to get up to some of the lesser owned, like really strong options that are expensive, guys like Derrick Henry, CeeDee Lamb. Beyond that, though, I can't have much love for a guy who was the consensus 101 in mock drafts, 3 years ago, and then fell to round 5. That's just not a great profile. Yeah. I believe it was 47th out of 61 qualifiers in yards per attempt in the preseason. So he lost the QB2 job to Haener. They're rolling with him because they have to, not because they want to at backup quarterback. So that's kind of how I'm seeing this game. Hilo, I'm curious if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, Bucky and Bucs D, man, is really my focus on this spot. Spencer Rattler had a 20.2% pressure to sack ratio in college. That led to 3.42 sacks taken per game his senior year. This is a spot where his pocket presence is below average, and we know that Todd Bowles is going to be bringing the unique blitzes. So this is a spot where the sacks, the turnovers could rack up. I think if you're playing Spencer Rattler, I think there is a very clear way to do it optimally. And I would pair him with Alvin Kamara. That's simply a way of taking, Alvin Kamara is going to project as a top 3 option on the slate from a raw points perspective. So if you're adding a 4K min price salaried quarterback to that, you have a chance to capture every touchdown that's scored in the spot. The problem is that might not be any or 1 or 2. But if you're playing Rattler, I'm not doing it naked, and I'm probably just pairing him with Alvin Kamara. It's kind of a way to just get some savings with Alvin Kamara. So, but yeah, that's kind of the way I'm seeing this game. I think Chris Godwin is worth mention, just with his role in this offense and the fact that you mentioned Mike Evans has historically struggled against this defense. He's getting priced to a point where he's unlikely to fully bury you, but he is viable. In this role, I guess that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, this is a massive trouble spot for Rattler. I asked Brett last week, or last night, what he thought of Rattler, and he was like, "Yeah, man, he's a gunslinger." But Jake, like you mentioned, obviously the regression year over year from freshman to senior year, not great. Also, Saints are probably going to miss their entire interior offensive line, center, both their guards. Hilo, you said it. Bowles blitzes at the highest rate. Those blitzes aren't really getting home a ton, but they are going to absolutely fire up Rattler. So Bucky and Bucs D is also my read. And man, it's such a good matchup for Olave and Shaheed. I just can't really get there though, with Rattler. He's going to have to get the ball out real quick. Let's keep it moving. Great game. Cardinals and Packers. This game has a 47.5 total. I'll be honest. I think this game should be the highest total of the slate. I think it should be up there with Commanders and Ravens. Packers 5.5-point favorites. Mark, the main reason is like everybody's healthy in this game. This is a relatively healthy game. Jordan Love is playing well. You and I are both kind of been on and off, I think, with this Cardinals passing offense, but they're all healthy. Fun game, man. What do you think about this one, and how are you kind of playing Love on this side with, Packers kind of condensed, Luke Musgrave's on IR, but we might get Christian Watson back, and Romeo Doubs will be back this week.
Yeah, I don't know if it's playing devil's advocate, but I see this spot a lot differently, actually. Okay. This spot sets up very similarly for the Packers, at least, to their setup last week. And I cautioned against the Packers pass game in that spot because we hadn't seen a game environment where the Packers had controlled up to that point. This game sets up very similarly in that there's a clear path to 30. I think last week I said there was a clear path to 30 team carries for the Packers, and they ended with 30 team carries. So does Jordan Love throw it 28 to 32 times is probably the range that I would put him at as far as pass attempts. But from a schematic standpoint, like this Cardinals defense is still a defense that's allowing the second most explosive plays through the air. There still can be had for big plays. So what we're looking for are the players on the Packers, pass catchers wise, that can do that. And that's Jaden Reed and that's Dontavian Wicks if Christian Watson is out. So watching the film from last week on the Packers, Love just missed some throws to Dontavian Wicks. Like he was there, man. And if Watson is out, he's going to be filling that downfield role. I mean, his ADOT is in the top 10 in the league. He's working deep. So Dontavian Wicks, again, back to the well, brings a lot of upside in the spot. Jaden Reed brings a lot. Josh Jacobs is probably going to finish 22 to 25 running back opportunities, so he's viable as well. And then I'll just keep saying it until the cows come home, really, about this Cardinals offense, man. This is like Drew Petzing's offense. For as long as he's in Arizona, they're just going to have to continue overcoming his scheme as opposed to his scheme putting them in the best position to succeed. So I'm off Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm off Kyler Murray. Like, can those players make plays on their own out of structure? 100%. We saw in week 2 against the Rams. But that's kind of what they have to do in the structure of this offense it's a lot is going to have to happen out of structure for them to succeed.
Jake, what do you think about Cardinals side here, man? I've kind of been going back and forth. Like schematically, it is a great spot for Marv, but for all the reasons Hilo just lined up, Cardinals have still been stubbornly very run heavy. Help me out, man. What do you think about Arizona in the spot?
Yeah, I think I'm a little closer to where you're at, Graham, than where Hilo is, at the very least, because of where ownership's sitting right now. I mean, Kyler Murray at 2% feels pretty dang good to me. Green Bay can't really generate any pressure, 4th lowest pressure rate over expectation. They're a top 10 schedule adjusted matchup for opposing passers. And I certainly agree with Hilo that, the scheme here is a concern, but a player of Kyler's talent level, in a spot that's the 3rd highest total on the main slate, I think is certainly tempting at 2%. And for what it's worth, I mean, Green Bay has funneled a ton of pass game production to the outside, which, gives Michael Wilson and MHJ pretty solid matchups. Green Bay has also had a slight lean towards single high fairly consistently this season. Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver 7 by yards per out run against single high. So I do think you can find some reasons to get to this, the Arizona side of this game. But, I agree that it's probably not the juiciest spot on the slate for sure.
Yeah, Kyler last week had to throw it 30 times only because they were in kind of catch-up mode. They've just been so slow and pass rate's not been great. But just to be clear, I really like this game only because I think Packers just have a massive ceiling. We saw it last week in the second half. Jordan Love started to get a little more comfortable. And yeah, Hilo, you're right. I mean, he left some yards on the field last week, but he still threw for 2 touchdowns for the 12th time in his last 13 games. I really like Packers side in this spot. Real quick, Tucker Kraft, obviously humongous price increase, $4,800.
Yeah.
But Jake, real quick, man. I mean, he was $3,500 last week. I still think it's a pretty good price. What do you guys think about Kraft here in the spot? I think he's going to go under-owned a little bit. I
mean, it seems like Ferguson's pulling notably more ownership across the industry. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really not seeing big ownership numbers on Kraft, and I don't see them being very far apart as plays overall. 12 targets on a 78% route share over the last 2 weeks, leads the position with 70 receiving yards per game, 23.1 fantasy points per game. He's looked good on film. I like Kraft. I mean, I think he's a pretty strong play.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, with Ferguson drawing so much ownership, man, and Kraft's a pretty good contrarian play if that holds. Because I mean, Kraft is like, I mean, Ferguson is too, but Kraft with 78% route share and good spot. It could be the tight end one on the slate. All right, we'll keep it moving. Colts and Titans, 2.5. Titans are getting 2.5. 43 is the total. It'll be Anthony Richardson. He has been trending up all week. Will Levis will start on the Titan side, and I'll throw it to you first, man. Obviously, if we got Flacco, we'd be a lot more excited about playing downs and playing, some of these Colts guys. Michael Pittman got in a full practice surprisingly after it seemed like he was going to miss this game with a back injury. It's kind of a messy game here, man. Help me walk through it. What do you see out of Colts Titans?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting dynamic in this game because the Titans really haven't been tested to this point. They played Miami without Tua. They played the Packers without Love. They played Caleb Williams in his first NFL start. So and then I think they played Aaron Rodgers' Jets, who the Jets are like bottom 5 in total yards of offense this season. So while they have allowed the fewest pass yards per game in the NFL, they haven't really been tested yet this season. So, but on the other side, it's like, what can we expect out of Anthony Richardson, right? Like he's by far one of the least efficient quarterbacks in the NFL. And the fact that Pittman, I think the most telling stat from Anthony Richardson over his first 3 starts was that Alec Pierce led the team in receiving all 3 games. Yeah. And that was on 3 targets, 4 targets, 3 targets. So to me, there's not a lot to love. And that's kind of backed up for me by the fact that the offense looks so much better with Flacco under center in the game and a half that he was, or the game and 3 quarters that he was. So I don't see where in this game there can be an ignition for the game environment. So that kind of leaves me follow the volume. If there's not something that can send the game environment over the edge, we're just looking for volume. And then we really don't have a ton to love as far as volume. Tony Pollard has a path to 19 to 22 running back opportunities, but very, very unlikely to see more than that because of the presence of Tajay Spears. We have Calvin Ridley, who's being almost unanimously used as a downfield threat. His 19.5 ADOT is top 5 in the league. I think it's second in the league, actually. So, there's not a lot for me personally to like from this spot, particularly considering the expected ownership on the backfield for the Titans.
Yeah, Tony Pollard at projected ownership. I think it'll come down with Bucky, and I think we're going to get Tyrone Tracy too. Excuse me, actually, that game's on Sunday night. When is that Giants game?
Yeah, Sunday.
Yeah, so sorry, I'm almost screwed up here. I was thinking about 3 different things. I was looking at the Colts pass rate last week. 9% pass rate over expectation. It was the first game all season they've had a positive P-row, so they're going to go back, obviously, to a pretty balanced offense. Hello, I kind of align with you and Jake, what is driving Tony Pollard's ownership? I mean, Tajay is back healthy. He was, dealing with a couple ankle injuries earlier this season, but I'm struggling with Pollard. I really don't understand why he is drawing so much ownership here.
Yeah, so I can give a couple bullish notes on Pollard, but I do want to preface it by saying I think he's going to go pretty clearly over-owned here relative to what I'm about to say. So if you isolate for games where Tajay Spears was fully healthy, he's still seeing mid-tier RB1 usage by expected fantasy points per game. Pollard at 17.2 expected fantasy points per game. That's really solid. Snapshare jumps from the mid-60s to 81% inside the 10. Colts are allowing the second most rushing yards per game this season. So those would be the reasons you would want to get behind a guy like Pollard. The price is fairly reasonable here, but again, I think ownership's just a little out of control. I actually have some interest in Will Levis and Calvin Ridley. Ridley, as Hilo noted, very high ADOT. He's also seen a notable boost against cover 3, which the Colts run at a top 5 rate. And, crucially here, Will Levis, hyper aggressive. The Colts are the single worst team against the deep ball by deep yards per game allowed. So this could be a bit of a sneaky spot for a guy who plays super, super aggressive and, has a wide receiver who's clearly in that deep ball role. The price is fairly reasonable on both Levis and Ridley. So, if I'm running a 150 set, which I will be this week, I might have, 5-8% Will Levis, Ridley type stacks. Certainly don't want to go crazy there because the game environment just isn't that great.
I'll jump in real quick, dude. What I will add on Tony Pollard is against the Colts, we know that they play a static cover 3 base, and that's built behind a 4-3 front. What that means is 4 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, and they're in cover 3, which typically has very delineated coverage responsibilities against the run from those linebackers. Typically, those coverage responsibilities are going to be more delineated against zone concepts. So A gap, B gap, C gap type stuff. Where you see this cover 3 kind of static cover 3 defense really struggle is against man gap concepts, because you get a pulling guard who gets into the second level and gets on one of those linebackers. And now you have a clear path or clear running lane into the secondary. So we saw it in week 2 against, we saw it in I forget when it was, but we saw it with the Packers, which they utilized Josh Jacobs. That game, he had like 32 carries against the Titans. We saw them utilize those concepts, or not the Titans, Colts, sorry. We saw them utilize those man gap concepts to great effect. So the fact that we have Tony Pollard, who has seen 43 carries behind gap man concepts and only 17 behind zone, is noteworthy here from a schematic matchup standpoint. So I think his efficiency probably gets a slight boost here.
Yeah, I just play Pollard's over then, man, in the prop. Like I don't know if I can get there to 6K with this ownership, but I think that's the way to play it. Good note there, high-low for sure. I was going to note real quick, DeAndre Hopkins has not played a full-time role like at all this year. His highest route share was 52% in week 4. Fully expect that to be back up out of the bye. He was obviously limited with the MCL issue. I think I'm actually a little more interested in him than Ridley in this spot. He looked pretty good in week 3, then Titans just took a dump in week 4 in that game. All right, we'll keep it moving here, boys. Let me get back up to my page. All right, Browns and Eagles. And Eagles, I think this is one of the biggest spreads of the year, 9.5 at home, out of the bye, fully healthy. A.J. Brown's back. Lane Johnson's back. Devonta Smith cleared concussion protocol. They are full go. Total 42.5, and it's so low, high-low, just because Deshaun Watson is shot, man. Like it's very, very Jover for him. I will say, they're finally going to get Jack Conklin back. Jedrick Willis will play, so at least he's going to have both of his tackles. I kind of just want to play Saquon in every lineup, to be honest with you guys. Hilo, what do you think about this spot?
I'm with you there. I think there's 4 pay-up players that we probably need to account for in some form or fashion this week. And they all play for teams that are amongst the top 4 teams in point totals, Vegas applied team totals. And that's Saquon Barkley, that's A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown against single high and man coverage, look out. And that's Derrick Henry, and that's CeeDee Lamb. So like those are the 4 players that I think are going to, like, the crux of this slate is built around those 4 players. And 2 of them obviously are in this game. From the other side, like that would be, you can play Saquon alone, you can play A.J. Brown alone, you can pair them with Jalen Hurts. All of that is on the table, particularly if Denzel Ward misses, which it appears he's likely to do. That's going to increase the matchup for A.J. Brown, like on an individual level, pretty immensely. On the flip side, Deshaun Watson has been one of the most pressure sensitive quarterbacks in the league in his time in Cleveland. And we've seen that against teams that are able to generate pressure. Like they look like crap against the Giants. They look like crap against the Commanders. These teams, they look like crap against the Cowboys. These are teams that are in the top 10 in pressure rate. Now you get an Eagles team coming to town that is in the bottom 5 in pressure rate, getting both of his tackles back. This might be a spot where he has a little bit more time to step into throws to hopefully Amari Cooper, who also is near the top of the league in most receiving metrics this year. Air yards share, ADOT, all these things that we look for like a boom type profile, he has in spades. So Amari Cooper is definitely interesting to me. I love pairing Amari with Saquon. I think that covers like a lot of different outcomes of this game. And then there's really nobody outside of those 3 players that I'm really looking at here.
Love that Amari Barkley play. Jake, I just 8,200 is too cheap for Barkley. He's basically the Christian McCaffrey of this season. Eagles just massive home favorites here. What do you think about this spot here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you guys. Love Saquon Barkley. 60% more productive in wins than losses since 2022. You know, Eagles are pretty massive favorites here. His productivity also jumps by 66% on a per snap basis while leading. So I love that Saquon Barkley call. Love the Amari Cooper call. I think that's a really great mini stack. Also wanted to give a shout out to my boy, AJ Smith, the offensive coordinator for the San Antonio Brahmas, who appears to have tuned in for a minute here. Love UFL, love spring football. AJ Smith is easily the brightest young mind in the game. So hopefully we can get him a head coaching gig soon. And I always love rostering his players in DFS. So just wanted to mention that. But I think
that's a sick shout. That's a sick shout.
Yeah. What's up, AJ? And 2 UFL spring football goats on the same screen at the same time with Jake and AJ. Look at that. I think we covered the bases here. I mean, this is just an awesome spot for AJ Brown. Browns play so much man coverage. I do think if Denzel Ward misses high-low, to your point, they've got to switch it up a little bit. They cannot play man coverage 50% of the time without Ward. So they'll probably play a little more too high, a little more zone. But yeah, I think that'll cover this game here. Let's move on to Texans and Patriots. Texans are 6.5 point road favorites. 37.5 is the total. We're going to get our first look at Drake May. And Jake, unfortunately, it's one of the worst spots. Texans are getting after it, man. Their front seven started slow, but they are really hot. We'll get started on Texans side. It looks like Joe Mixon's going to be back this week. I think he'll be a little limited, but he's missed the last 3 weeks. Should be like close-ish to a full-time role. Obviously, Nico Collins is on IR, pour one out. What say you about the Texans in this spot? Patriots, they obviously got off to a great start this season with, in week 1 against the Bengals, but they've not been as good the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I have major concerns about the game environment here. New England being one of the more man-heavy defenses in the NFL should be worth a boost to Tank Dell. Top 15 in yards per out run against man coverage since the start of his career. But yeah, I mean, this game environment just is not looking great. I'm also seriously worried about Drake May in this game. By far the worst pass blocking grade in our offensive line, defensive line tool, because the New England offensive line is terrible and Houston is fantastic at getting pressure. So this could be a really tricky game for Drake May. What it's worth, the only guy that I'm really interested in, well, I guess, Antonio Gibson will pop as an okay value, but Bucky Irving is just a notably better play. Hunter Henry is New England's number 1 option against pressure. He's hit 16 DraftKings points 5 times since the start of last season. That's behind only George Kittle, Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce. Maybe Drake May provides a bit of a spark here and can feed Hunter Henry, but it feels really thin. I just don't have a ton of interest here, but I'm curious if Hilo has any other angles on this game.
Yeah, I do. And it's really gross. The 3-player combination of Drake May, Demario Douglas, and Jalen Polk. The reason I say those names is Jalen Polk is up to an every down player, and Demario Douglas plays out of the slot, which we know DeMeco Ryans has. It's kind of the weak point in DeMeco Ryans' defenses typically. 9th in fantasy points or in yardage allowed to slot wide receivers last season in Houston, and then 7th most yardage allowed to slot wide receivers in 2022. And the reason I think that this combo of Drake May, Demario Douglas, and Jalen Polk, it costs just $13K in salary on DraftKings. Which is a very, very interesting way to gain access to all these Saquon Barkley, CeeDee Lamb, Derrick Henry, AJ Browns that we talked about earlier. Whereas I think the field, in order to do that, is probably looking at Spencer Rattler and a lot of more thin. And not to say that Demario Douglas and Jalen Polk and Drake May aren't thin. They are. But it's very interesting to me to play all them together, to bring it back with Dalton Schultz, who is only 4,100, who we know his splits with Nico Collins on and off the field from last season. Now you have this 4-player stack that costs just 17.1. You need 17 fantasy points from each of those players to keep you on a 200-point pace. So this game environment, while it's not likely that we see Drake May succeed in his first NFL start against the defense that's generating the 4th highest pressure rate. But something that adds to the potential upside here is Drake May had an 11.1% scramble rate when under pressure in college. For comparison, Justin Fields had 11.4% during his college career. Jaden Daniels had 14.1%. And we've seen his jump all the way up to 30% in the professional level. Or 40% even. So Can we see New England like move the football here? I don't know. I'm not saying that like this 3 or 4 player stack is like going to win you $1,000,000. I'm saying it allows you to pay up for some really fun stuff. So I have a little bit more interest in this spot, and that's one bet you're making to get 3 or 4 roster positions right, as opposed to like just playing Spencer Rattler or paying Spencer Rattler with Alvin Kamara. Even if that pays off, you're getting 2 roster spots right. So yeah, I think the Hunter shout is a good shout. I've been toying around with that as well, but I actually have some interest here, and it's really gross, but I like it.
Yeah, I was going to say the only value tight end I'm seeing right now is Schultz. This is a good spot too. Patriots are allowing the 8th most receiving yards per game to tight ends. But yeah, you noted the splits without Nico. I mean, it's just taking out the major first read. And just last week, Schultz had a season high. Targets season high in first read share at 17%, 6 targets, 17%. First read share is like borderline tight end 1 stuff for this season. So yeah, like that a lot at 4,100. I don't think anybody's really on that. I don't want to play a 7K CJ Stroud for all the reasons you guys have mentioned. Just the game environment stinks. But if you are, I do like Schultz with him. All right, we'll keep it moving on to the game of the week, at least in the 1 p.m. window. The Commanders and the Ravens. 6.5 point favorites. The total is 51.5. Obviously, just such a sick quarterback matchup here, high-low. Jaden Daniels starting to come up in price, though. 7,300 this week. He is now, what, 1,300, 1,400 more expensive than his opening salary. Still probably a little bit too cheap. Good spot. Ravens secondary has been regressing all year. They have a pretty good pass rush, which will probably force Jaden Daniels out of the pocket a little bit more. Just a lot of fun angles. What do you think about this game?
Sorry, was that me?
Yeah, sorry, Mark. Yeah,
I missed it.
Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, this is very interesting too. Another game where it's very clear to me like how you play this game. And it kind of depends on the Ravens and their tendencies that we've seen. Like they very clearly want to come out and establish the run. We've seen 2 games where they've controlled the game environments. In those games, Patrick Ricard has played near 60% of the offensive snaps. They come out in this Wildcat. They come out with 3 players in the backfield, and they just let Derrick Henry run over people. That's how I think they want to approach this spot. Whether or not they're allowed to do that depends on the Commanders. And we've seen insane efficiency over this team over the last 4 weeks. They punted 3 times last week. Oh my God, it was crazy, right? Like we'd seen 1 punt in the previous 3 games. They punted 3 times and they had another interception. But like this team is putting up some points and they're doing work. So if that happens, like if the Commanders are able to, score a touchdown on their first possession, kick a field goal on the subsequent possession, get out to a lead, that's how we unlock the pass game from the Ravens. So because we're only really concerned with Lamar Jackson when we're in either a shootout or when they're trailing, how do they get into that? It has to come through Commanders' success on the scoreboard. And where is that production likeliest to come from? From Jaden Daniels. So I actually like Jaden Daniels a bit more than I like Lamar Jackson in this spot because he covers more potential outcomes of this game environment. Similar discussion for like Derrick Henry. He is most beneficial when the Ravens are able to control the game environment. So that is like one of 4 potential outcomes because there's like Ravens control it. There's a shootout. There's a slugfest where neither offense is succeeding. And then there's the Commanders control it. He really only is usable in one of those 4 situations that we're going to see from this game. So you can play Derrick Henry. I would either play him naked or bring him back with somebody with a downfield role like Terry McLaurin. And Terry McLaurin now, like we got done like crapping all over him after the first week where he saw 1 downfield look. Now he's tied with Rashid Shaheed for the most downfield targets in the league with 11. So that's notable as well in this spot where we know the Ravens are struggling deep. So this game kind of is very clear to me how we should approach it. I think you can play Jaden Daniels with Terry McLaurin. You can play Jaden Daniels naked, which I don't typically like doing. You can play them with Derrick Henry. And then if you want to get access to the Ravens pass game, it has to have a piece of the Commanders as well.
Yeah, Zay Flowers is the entire Ravens pass game right now. I mean, they've gone with a full rotation of tight ends. Justice Hill has popped up as their lead target a few games. So, if you're playing Ravens pass game, it's really just Flowers, and he's a fine price at 6,500. Jake, what do you think about this game, man? I kind of lean towards Hilo's kind of train of thought, where my initial was just like, I want to play Henry with Jaden Daniels and McLaurin. It's kind of a little less popular than I think I expected, but it's a lot harder to get up to these running backs this week. We're going to get Bucky, but there's not a ton of value on this slate. So how are you playing this game?
Yeah, I'm certainly with you guys. I think Jaden Daniels is, just looking at projected ownership, I'm seeing, Lamar across the industry, 13, 14, 15%. Jaden Daniels a lot closer to 7 or 8%. And they're very, very comparable plays to me. So I certainly line up with Hilo's line of thinking here. And yeah, definitely Zay Flowers. If you are going with Jaden Daniels stack, I would lean more towards Zay at least. He's done nothing in the 2 games. Derrick Henry has earned more than 20 carries, but he's been top 10 in wide receiver expected fantasy points in Baltimore's other 3 games. So yeah, like you said, Graham, when they get the passing attack going, it's all Zay Flowers. Certainly want pieces of Henry too. The rushing matchup for Henry is just absolutely incredible. Washington, while they are still a favorable passing matchup for opposing offenses, they're actually a bigger run funnel this year than they are a pass funnel, which is certainly a good note for Henry.
Yes, it is. This just stands out as another massive Henry spot. Commanders are giving up the most yards per carry in the league. But man, I kind of think Commanders keep this game close, in which case Zay Flowers is pretty good play. I was going to note, I don't think Brian Robinson is going to play this week. He has a knee injury. He didn't play in the entire second half last week, only played 32% of the snaps. So it's going to be some sort of mix between Eckler and Jeremy McNichols. Ravens have been pretty good against the run. So I do think we'll see Washington throw a little bit more this week if B-Rob is out with that injury.
I will add at the end of that that the Ravens have created through run blocking the second highest adjusted yards before contact, the highest at 3.62, and the Commanders are seeding the second highest at 2.75. So talking about Derrick Henry in space not being touched, that's some big upside here.
Yeah, that's 150 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, sounds like, for Henry there. All right, we'll keep it moving. Chargers and Broncos start of the afternoon slate. Chargers 3-point road dogs, road favorites. A bunch of road favorites this week. 35.5 total is the lowest total on the slate, even lower than the Texans Patriots game. Be honest here, boys, I don't have a whole lot. Mark, I'll kick it to you first, man. I'm a little interested in Ladd McConkey only because Quentin Johnston's going to be shadowed by Pat Surtain. Broncos blitz a ton, kind of leaves the middle of the field open. McConkey's been playing more, getting more first reads. J.K. Dobbins is a little interesting too. It's just this game is not super exciting, and Broncos defense has played really well, man. By scheme, they're dialing up the pressure with the blitzes, playing a ton of man coverage because Surtain is outrageously good. Tricky spot. What do you think about this game?
Let's look first at Justin Herbert's pass attempts. 26, 20, 18, and 27. So that should tell us all we need to know.
23 attempts per game, dude. He was averaging, 39 in his entire career?
17.5 catchable targets per game. That's about half as many as Seattle.
Bro, that's like Falcons Desmond Ridder bad.
Yeah.
It is.
So even if Ladd McConkey sees a 30% target share, we're still talking about 7-8 looks. And on his low ADOT, that's not enough to be GPP viable. So I really don't have any interest anywhere in this game.
Yeah. Honestly, that's probably the right take. Jake, what say you, man? I don't have much here.
I'm pretty much in line with you guys. I do like J.K. Dobbins a bit here. 85% share of backfield XFP over the last 2 weeks. That would actually rank second best among all players over the full season. The rushing matchup here is slightly favorable. Obviously, we know the Chargers want to attack on the ground. Plus, Joe Alt is back. Rashawn Slater might be as well. With both those guys in the lineup, Dobbins averaged an obscene 7.4 yards per carry. So there's a little juice there with Dobbins. But, again, this really isn't a game environment we want to attack too much.
Yeah, Gus Edwards out this week. I think we're going to see Kamani Vidal make his debut. Interesting stash in season-long Vidal, but man, I don't have a whole lot. Javonte Williams feels like a massive trap at 5,500. He's playing better. Snaps have come up, but they're going to play Audric Estime this week. Sean Payton's been trying to do a 3-man committee all year. Feels very trappy. All right, we'll keep it moving. Another gross game. I saved the last 2 better games for last. Steelers and Raiders. Steelers are 3-point road favorites, 36.5 total. I'm pretty interested in Justin Fields this week. I think he played poorly on the Island game last week. He's still too cheap, Jake, at 5,800. And obviously, this is just an amazing bounce back spot. Raiders don't get a whole lot of pressure. Secondary's kind of stunk. I don't know who to stack him with, and I kind of just want to play Fields with Brock Bowers and just no Steelers run back. I think that's kind of the way I'm thinking of this game. If I do play Fields, what do you think about Steelers and Raiders here, man?
Yeah, I mean, there's always some juice with a guy like Justin Fields, especially sub 6K. But yeah, that is the really tricky part. I mean, who do you stack him with? Obviously, there's a bit of a squeaky wheel narrative with Pickens, but only a 61% route share last week. It was at least a little encouraging to me that he ran half those routes from the slot. The Raiders are a major slot funnel, so I guess you could argue for Pickens on that basis. Maybe Pat Freiermuth, but yeah, I think I'm with you, Graham, that, if you did want to get exposure to this game, Fields with Bowers would probably be the best way to do it. Jacoby Myers looks like he's truly questionable. So if he says Trey Tucker's going to pop as a really strong value, my only note with Tucker though, was that he's one of the least efficient wide receivers in the league against cover 3. And Steelers are a cover 3 heavy team. So that's not a great schematic note, but again, with no Jacoby Myers, the volume would certainly be there for the price. Hilo, do you have any other angles here?
No, man, you crushed that. That's everything I'm seeing as well.
Yeah, nice. Jalen Warren's going to be back. You weren't playing Najee anyway. And I just...
Please don't.
Yeah, don't play. Yeah, never Najee. This is firmly a no Najee show. Never. But Pickens, man, I just wish you were a little cheaper. The price has not come down on him. He's still 6K. There's some receivers I like in that range a lot more. All right, we'll keep it moving here. Falcons and Panthers, 6-point. Falcons are 6-point favorites again on the road, 47 total. One of those receivers I like a lot more in that range is Deontay Johnson at 6,100. Got shut down last week against Jalen Johnson, high-low, but much better spot this week. I think Falcons are pretty overrated defense. They obviously moved Johnson into the slot a ton too. Falcons have been awful inside against slot receivers. Everybody in this game, I think all the receivers are too cheap. Deontay, London, Mooney. Fun game to stack. What do you think? And what do you think of Cousins here, man? You playing some Kirk chains? I don't know why I can never say that.
Kirk cocaine.
Yeah, I said that last night. I don't know why. I can never get that out.
That's great. This is the game of the cover 3. Like, both of these teams are top 5 in the league in cover 3. The Panthers lead the league in cover 3 by a lot. And what's most interesting to me about that is it's actually a pretty poor schematic fit for all the reasons that we talked about when we talked about cover 3 and what's useful against it, because so much of Bijan's workload is behind zone blocking concepts. They run a wide zone. And while that is good for like short yardage stuff, while that is it's good for a back with good vision, because they can pick out the zone, they can pick out where those holes are going to be. It really, really limits your upside as an offense against cover 3, where you have 4 down linemen and 3 linebackers that are just clogging the middle of the field in the box. One of the adjustments that Gus Bradley in Indianapolis tried to make without changing the entirety of his scheme is he widened the width of his linebackers. And he did that after they got shredded on the ground against these these man gap concepts. But when you look at the tendencies of Bijan Robinson and of Robinson in the offensive coordinator, they have run 57 carries for Bijan behind zone concepts, just 9 behind man gap concepts. So whereas we're looking for like these schematic elements that matter on the ground, this is definitely like not the best spot, despite what the top level numbers tell us. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's also worth noting this Atlanta passing game, Kyle Pitts still ain't it. Like, yeah, he saw 7 targets last week. That was 4th on the team. Like, they threw the ball 500 times. So yeah, that was still behind like Ray McLeod. Like, that's not what you want to see out of a guy like Kyle Pitts. So I don't have a lot of interest from this game. I think it has more clear paths to failure because neither of these teams are really looking to push the envelope on their own. They're kind of adjusting to the game as it comes. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't see it, especially cost considered. Like, Chuba Hubbard's fine. He narrowly missed 100 yards for the third straight game last week in a much more difficult matchup. He's fine. Highly unlikely to bury you for not playing him. Same thing for Deontay Johnson. Even in like his career high game in the first Andy Dalton start, like you can overcome a score like a 27-point score from a wide receiver priced at 6K, 6,100, 60, whatever it is, 6,100, I think. Like you can overcome that. So yeah, and that was his career high. So I'm just kind of at a loss for this game. I really don't have a clear lean other than like, this is probably not as good a spot as I think it appears to be on the surface.
Yeah, I think I disagree. I think only because Falcons last 2 weeks, even, last week, obviously Cousins threw for 500, but the previous week they were at 12% pass rate over expectation. So back-to-back games where they're just slinging the pill. I do agree that Panthers, we probably were anointing Andy Dalton a little too quickly.
Yeah.
That's my big concern. But I think Falcons are in a really good spot here, Jake. What do you think about this game?
Yeah, so I thought Hilo's note on Bijan was really interesting. I will say Carolina's bottom 5 in both yards per carry and success rate against zone concept runs. So they have been very weak against zone concept runs, even if, cover 3 does suggest they should be a little bit stronger. This is just all around a very, very bad defense, both for the run and the pass. Kirk Cousins, I'm moderately interested in. I'll probably match, if he's going to be 6, 7, 8% owned, I'll probably roughly match the field. And then, Darnell Mooney, Drake London are 2 of the best overall values on the slate. Even Ray McLeod is popping as a pretty decent value. And he leads the team in yards per out run against cover 3. And, as we've noted, cover 3 heavy game here. I think Chuba Hubbard and Deontay are both okay. I feel pretty lukewarm about both. I'd probably prefer Deontay overall. I did note that, the Panthers have trailed on about half their plays over the last 3 weeks. Chuba Hubbard has only scored about 30% of his fantasy points while trailing. So, the usage production hasn't been quite as good for Chuba while trailing compared to, tied with the lead. So that does make me prefer Deontay Johnson a bit more there.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to play Deontay on every lineup at 6,100. I'm just sitting here thinking about this. I mean, this is just too cheap for him. I will say that I think pretty much all the highest point per dollar values on the slate are in this game at receiver. I think you could order it Mooney, Johnson, and then London. Trey Tucker, I think, Jake, you mentioned him. If we don't get Myers, he'll probably pop up there too. But yeah, a lot of value in this game. I think the ownership is going to reflect it for sure.
If Ian Thomas sits, Jatavion Sanders is like, if you want to just get rid of tight end, just so that you can play the highest projected guys at 2,600. He'll have a 70% route share. That's basically the only good thing I can say about him, though.
He'll have a pulse on Sunday, and he'll be on the field.
2,600
at min price. Yeah.
yeah. There you go.
That definitely plays. I like that shout, Jake. All right, I think that'll cover it. Game of the week here. Lions and Cowboys in Dallas. Lions 3-point favorites. 52.5 is the total. Man, seeing a 52.5 total just makes you happy to be alive. It is great to see that total here in 2024 with scoring starting to pick back up. Awesome game, man. Awesome game. Detroit is obviously just playing awesome run defense, Mark. It's going to force Dallas even more to the air. I mean, obviously, they're extremely pass heavy. Probably the 2 highest ceiling receivers on the slate right here in CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown. How are you playing this game, dude?
Yeah, I think it starts with the Cowboys. And the reason is we expect the Lions to succeed regardless. The problem with the Lions is they have 5, 6 skill position players that like contribute on a weekly basis. So it's very like, even if I could capture all of the running back production from both of those guys into one entity, I would do that. So can you play both of them on the same roster? Maybe in small field stuff, but that kind of inhibits the ceiling here. Like even if they score 3 rushing touchdowns, as they've done as recently as last week, like it's highly unlikely that one of those guys is going to be getting all of them. So Jahmyr Gibbs, like his season high in DraftKings points this season is what? Like 19.8 last week. He's had a very, very tight floor, 16.3 to 19.8, but like we need a little bit more ceiling from a 7K player. Comparatively, like David Montgomery he can go over 100 yards and a touchdown in the spot, but it becomes that much more likely or much more unlikely that he's going to see multiple touchdowns with that. So like, and then where do we go? Like, or can we pay 8,100 for Amon-Ra when CeeDee Lamb is right across the street from him? I don't know. Like, so it's very, very hard to see anchoring rosters about the Lions this week. Whereas you look at the Cowboys, they can't run the football. Their backfield depth is crap. And now they have a more condensed target tree because of the absence of Brandon Cooks. And it's like, why are we not more interested in CeeDee Lamb? And I say we, like the general public. He's coming in at sub 10% ownership. Like that should not happen. Why is that? Because pricing is tight. He hasn't hit 100 yards yet this season, but we've seen these like slot hybrid wide receivers just wreck the Lions up to this point in the season. It was Chris Godwin. It was who else did they play? Cooper Kupp in week 1. Yeah, remember him? Golly.
Our boy. Yeah. How could we ever forget our boy? Yeah, no, of course. No, I love that angle. My angle in this game, man, is Dak, CD with Laporta. I think Ferguson's just going to be massive chalk, as he should be. I mean, only Trey McBride has more targets per route run. What's that, Mark?
I got something to say about that, too.
Yeah.
The Cowboys have had a flippening because of the change in defensive coordinator. They went from the man heaviest team in the league last year, or I think they're second behind Cleveland. Now they're one of the zone heaviest teams. And Sam Laporta has very stark splits against man and zone over the first season and a half of his career. The thing with Ferguson is I'm not scared of the ownership because the field is probably going to play him wrong. How does Ferguson sink you on this slate? He puts up a score you had to have, the top tight end score of the week, and nobody else comes close because of the state of the position right now. If he does that, he's probably going to need 100 yards in a score or multiple scores. So what does that do? It directly correlates to Dak Prescott. And I don't think the field is going to be pairing Ferguson with Dak Prescott enough. And I don't think they're going to play all of Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Jake Ferguson. So whereas like the field is just looking like, oh, he projects as the top point per dollar play on the slate. That's not how you win a tournament. You win a tournament if he scores so much more than everybody else at the position. And that directly means that Dak Prescott is probably scoring so much more than everybody else at the position. Otherwise, go play Jatavian Sanders. Like if no tight end puts the slate out of reach, like a 4 for 41 line from Jatavian Sanders can win you a tournament because what it allows you to pay up for. So I'm not scared of the ownership of Ferguson because I just think the field is not going to play him correctly from like a theoretical standpoint here.
Yeah, from a ceiling standpoint, I think there's 5 tight ends that have similar ceilings: McBride, Bowers, Kraft, Laporta. So I'm with you. I think in terms of ceiling, it's pretty close with this week. This is probably the best tight end week we've had in a long time, Jake. What's your angles in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm pretty much in line with you guys. You know, the thing to start with this game is that the Cowboys defense has been the strongest run funnel in the NFL, -7% pass rate over expectation allowed. Lions defense has been the strongest pass funnel in the NFL, 8% pass rate over expectation allowed. So I really like, I think I'm a little bit more bullish on especially Jahmyr Gibbs than Hilo is, but I certainly understand the issue there when they're splitting these back, it's the most valuable backfield in fantasy. When it's a 50-50 split, that is pretty tough. The one really encouraging note that I did have for Jahmyr Gibbs was that, the knock on him has generally been touchdown equity. He's 4th among all players right now in red zone opportunities per game. He's averaging 2 more red zone opportunities per game relative to last season. He's roughly on par with Saquon Barkley in terms of red zone opportunities per game. So I think there's a little bit more juice with Jahmyr Gibbs in tournaments than maybe we're giving him credit for. But overall, I think, the angle on this game is exactly as Hilo said. You want to play Dak, you want to play CD. The matchup for CD also is fantastic. Schematically, the Lions run a ton of man coverage. They're also a bit of a slot funnel. So yeah, this lines up really, really well for CeeDee Lamb. He'll probably be by far my highest owned player of the slate.
Yeah.
I feel really good about him. I was harassing Chris Weck to get his projection up where I believe at least 1.5 points higher than the next closest site on CeeDee Lamb. So, yeah. So we're going to be really high on CeeDee Lamb as a company. And I feel really good about that.
Yeah. Very nice. I was going to mention something. It just slipped my mind, though. Oh, Gibbs. Yeah, you brought up the red zone equity. Yeah, 10 carries for Montgomery inside the 10, 7 for Gibbs through their first 4 games. So it's been a lot tighter this year. It's just I think Hilo maybe said it. It's just hard to get there at 7K. I can find some extra money to get up to Barkley if I need to, or to Henry.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at. Guys, great show. If you're playing FanDuel this week, they have the Sunday night game included. And I mentioned Tyrone Tracy earlier. I had FanDuel pulled up. He's 5,800 over there. So if you're playing on FanDuel this week, yeah, it's Tyrone Tracy week. Enjoy that. Also enjoy Jake and Ryan Heath, man. You guys have been crushing the drafter party, going through some Battle Royale teams on Underdog. Jake and Ryan will be live in a little over 30 minutes in the same spot. So make sure you stick here, watch those two, rip some teams, and give some great advice for this week. Guys, any other final thoughts on this slate?
I will say another note that I had for the Sunday night football game is that Daniel Jones is actually popping as a pretty decent value on FanDuel. He's a little interesting. And then in regards to the Underdog drafter party, me and Ryan have both had top 5 tournament finishes in each of the last 2 weeks. So I think we've been, providing some pretty solid content there. And yeah, you guys can come ask us questions. We review our favorite scroll down options, best ways to attack specific contest types. I think we've been doing a really good job with that. And it's just a really fun show, really casual. We have a lot of audience engagement there. So yeah, good time. Definitely check that out.
You know what top 5 finishes lead to? They lead to Banks, Jake.
Banks, baby.
I hope so, man. I hope so.
You need them. Let's go.
Let's go. On that note, Jake's going to be at the top of the leaderboards in the Battle Royale streets and the DFS streets this week. Guys, we'll see you at the top of the leaderboard. Good luck in week 6.
What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.